It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Michael Hughes, President and CEO of Elevation Labs. Michael has over 18 years of experience in the beauty and skincare industry, and he started his career with Procter Gamble in Ireland, producing skincare and cosmetic brands such as Olay, Max Factor, and CoverGirl. Michael received his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University College Dublin in Ireland and a master's in business administration from the University of Iowa. His goal is to build on Elevation's world-class operations, creating a culture that is highly adaptable, team-oriented, and streamlined to ensure excellent workflow and best-in-class responsiveness for every customer. Michael Hughes, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you, Brant. Happy to be here.
Great to have you here. And it's just after the holidays, and I'm actually in Connecticut with a little bit of cold outside. We had a little flurry of snow, and the sun came out. What's it like in Idaho today?
We've had more than a flurry of snow the last couple of days. So.
You're right in the midst of it up there,
We're in the midst
right?
of it, yeah. Good skiing season.
I can imagine. Well, I imagine it's a little bit different than your early days in Ireland. So let's talk about that. Tell me about those early years, where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in a town called Bray in County Wicklow in Ireland, just south of Dublin.
Okay. So East Coast, right?
East Coast, yeah. Right. And lived, 10 minutes from the ocean, and nice. Totally took that for granted while I lived there.
Of course.
From living in the middle of the U.S., you realize what you miss when you go back home. So
right. Now, were you able to swim in that ocean? It must have been pretty cool weather or pretty cool temperatures.
Well, when you grow up there, you don't realize what cold is, and you jump in the sea when you get the opportunity.
Nice.
I don't know if I'd be jumping in today, but when kids, they don't think too much about that kind of thing.
Brothers and sisters, parents, tell me a little bit about them.
Sure, yeah. So my parents did a great job raising all five of us.
Right.
Yeah, my dad was an electrician. He had to leave school early and take an apprenticeship and
working class.
And worked through that, and actually went back to school later in his career at night time, which I remember that pretty vividly as a child, how hard he worked during the day, and then would hop on a train into Dublin City and go to night courses and built up his education that way, and actually ended up he worked 42 years for the same company, for the electrical supply company for Ireland.
Awesome.
And ended up doing electrical kind of safety training around the country and around the world even. So he had a pretty good career overall. My mother,
with five kids, I'm sure she worked from the home for the most part,
yeah,
right?
For the most part. She helped mind some other kids for other parents as well in the community.
Nice.
And then went back to work actually when the kids got a little bit older as a secretary in a local high school.
Right. Where were you in the mix? Right in the middle, at the top, at the bottom?
Second oldest,
okay.
Yeah.
Got it. And what were some of the things that you remember? Maybe inspirations from mom and dad. Sounds like dad was a pretty hard worker, certainly committed to his job. Any things that stood out from you in those early days?
Yeah, I think both my parents worked extremely hard. And took their roles seriously, really looked after us kids. I think one of the things that kind of stood out was they were pretty strict on rules, like we weren't allowed to watch television during the week. So we read a lot of books, all five of us.
Nice.
We played together, it was a great having, your own basketball team-sized family. We're all
That's
within a couple of
There
years
was always
of each other.
somebody to play with. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
awesome.
so a lot of playing out in the street and cycling around and built some good autonomy in that way. We were very involved in sports and scouting and all that kind of thing growing up, and would, get on a train at a young age and head into Dublin City and do different activities like that. So built up a lot of autonomy and trust with the parents from an early age.
Was it kind of a small rural town? You said you were south of Dublin. Was it kind of greater Dublin area? You're kind of a suburb there? Or,
it's more of the latter. Yeah, more of a greater Dublin area. So straight kind of commuter train into the city. So
awesome. Were you a good student in school?
I think I always got pretty good grades in school. I don't know if the teachers would say I was the most studious. I had fun. I played a lot of sport. Had a great set of friends growing up, and didn't take school overly seriously. It was relatively competitive kind of schooling. I was in an all boys school in high school, which is not unusual in Ireland, but that helped, I guess.
Catholic, was it? Was it a Catholic school or more of a private school?
It was Catholic. It was a public school.
Public school.
But I played rugby in the school and played basketball. And so, just always busy with different activities and kind of took more satisfaction even out of my kind of sporting successes or achievements than even academic. I'd always kind of been a little bit lucky on that front.
Was rugby the favorite sport?
That was the big sport in our school. I played for a few years. I picked up a few injuries and decided to switch over to basketball later on in my career, and actually played basketball in college as I went on.
Cool.
So I always enjoyed those type of
coaches can have a big influence on us as we grow up. Was there one that you remembered in particular, good or bad, because sometimes some of the things we see, that are not particularly the best behavior do last with us, but were there early coaches that inspired you in life?
Yeah, I had some really great coaches, both in the sport world and in the scouting world. And I think the one thing that kind of sticks out to me is that they all gave me opportunities to develop leadership skills. I didn't realize it at the time, but to be the captain of a team or to be the junior leader in a scouting organization and taking on some responsibilities like that, I think that's had a huge impact on me year on year. I never kind of shied away from those opportunities in the work environment then after that. So
I can imagine.
Lots of impacts on that front.
So scouting, are we talking about Boy Scouts or was it a different organization in Ireland?
Yeah, it's the Boy Scouts of Ireland. Yeah,
Boy Scouts of Ireland, right. Yeah. So a lot of outings, merit badges, those types of approaches. Was it modeled similarly to BSA?
Yeah, I think it's very, very similar concepts. Reward and recognition for different achievements and, different
camp outs and long hikes and so forth.
Groups and camping events.
Yeah. If you look back at those Boy Scout years, what were some of the things that you think you kind of retained as a manager today, as a leader today?
I think, listening to your teammates, understanding, you could be in the middle of a forest and trying to work out what direction you're going in to get back to home base. And, quite often.
Better not be too autocratic on that one, right?
You don't want to rely on one person's judgment, having a second set of eyes on things and being able to be humble enough to listen to those things. I think that helped us out of a few pickles that we found ourselves in.
That's great. Kids that grow up in America and many of our CEOs did a lot of entrepreneurial things. But of course, that's a very American cultural thing, right? You have the paper route, you mow the lawn, etc. Was it similar in Ireland, or was there really not the spending money, kind of motivation at that earlier age?
I think there was. We didn't come from a very wealthy family, so my parents did a great job looking after the basic needs. But if you wanted to do anything extra above and beyond, you went out and kind of earned that yourself.
Were you one of those kids? And if so, what kind of things did you do?
I think I was. I for example, our scout troop went on several international trips, one to Germany and one later on to Canada, which you can imagine are pretty expensive.
Wow.
And they let you kind of generate some money for yourself in that process. I remember going down to a local supermarket and talking to the manager. I was probably 14 years old at the time, and convincing them that they should let the scout group pack bags at the end of the aisle and wheel the carts out for the patrons and get tips that were put towards their trips, that kind of activity. But I did genuinely organize that myself. I took on jobs that by the time I was 16, I was doing 3 different jobs.
Wow.
I worked as a waiter in a bar when I was 14.
Wow.
That wasn't totally legal at the time, but
I was going to say, was it 15 the drinking age in Ireland? Don't answer that question.
It's 18, but you could work there, I think, as a 16-year-old. But I think I stuck my way in early and learned how to, in a pretty blue-collar bar, and I learned how to work with all different types of customers and deal with different types of pressure. You can imagine live music kind of venue, and eventually became a barman there and worked there for 7 years. I also started to...
Really? Was that through the college years then, Michael?
Yeah, through college years as well, yeah.
Awesome.
I worked in a department store for my summers as a kind of second job, and then I began to teach mathematics and physics when I was about 17 or 18.
Teaching or coaching or tutoring?
Teaching, yeah. It's kind of tutoring, kind of like tutoring, extra one-on-one. Right. It started off as one-on-one, what they call grinds in Ireland, for people that are coming up to exam periods. And then word got out, and I got recruited by a school that did extra curricular kind of teaching, and I ended up teaching classes of 20 and 30 kids. I've always loved teaching. I still do that as a kind of primary part of my job today, but trying to help people, build different skill sets.
It's very interesting. Yeah, my father was a teacher for many, many years, and my daughter is now a learning specialist. She works with kids that have, learned differently. And Dad, it's not learning disabilities; it's how they learn differently. Kids on the autism scale. There's a lot of satisfaction in teaching. Absolutely. Did you find that being the same for you?
Yes, absolutely. And you learn. One thing that I learned at the time as a kind of a teenager was the different methods people learn, the different ways they learn visually or through writing or through practice or whatever else. And obviously the different pace that people learn at as well. It kind of gave me a bit of a better understanding of, why some people pick things up very quickly and others are in different ways and at different paces. And I think that's also helped me in later years in life too.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you said your dad, worked, obviously went back and got his degree. Mom, was she degreed or kind of finished the junior high or high school? And what was her educational background?
Yeah, she was just in high school and then started working, I think, in a local store and started a family pretty young.
Started a family early on, I can imagine.
It was pretty normal back then. So then she went back to school later on.
Okay, so you went back to school as well. Oh, cool.
Sorry, she went back to work at a school as a secretary.
Yeah. Oh, got it. So you went to college. Was it kind of a foregone conclusion? Was that something that mom and dad, kind of had planned for you? I mean, with 5 brothers and sisters, obviously it would be hard to finance that. But, what was your thinking about that? Was that something that was just always you were encouraged to do growing up?
Yeah, always. And the whole family, where all 5 of us went to college. In Ireland, cool. It's a totally different setup than what we have in the US. So, in fact, the years I went to college, it was completely state funded. So,
that's great.
It didn't cost a penny. I really like the system in Ireland. It's a complete meritocracy. It's purely based on the scores you get in your final exams after finishing high school. So there's no kind of who there's no financial implications of what you can afford or not. And basically the top students get into the top courses. So
that's great. And you went to University College Dublin, and as I recall, you did mechanical engineering, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
What led you into that field?
I was always, always interested in mathematics and physics and science. I liked a lot of my subjects. In fact, one of my concerns going into engineering was I loved English, the English language, and studying Shakespeare and Yeats. And I was worried I'd lose that or lose the need for those kind of skills. But I found that, obviously, in this type of role, being a good communicator and being able to express yourself succinctly has been critical too. I was always interested in Formula One racing, car racing. That's kind of a big thing in Ireland and across the world. So I didn't envision at the time of studying mechanical engineering that I'd spend the next 20 years working on cosmetics and skincare for women.
I would have guessed, Well, did you have a strong math and science? We have one ME in the family, my oldest son. And, he was the one, even when he was 6 years old, right, that we get the gift at Christmas, nobody understand it, give Christian the instructions, right? Were you those kind of kid where you kind of always had an affinity towards things that were science oriented, or did that come later?
Yeah, no, always inquisitive and curious and learning, and math always came relatively easy. I thought I was pretty good until my younger brother came along and beat me at every award. He's on a different scale.
He had
altogether.
a goal. You set the bar, but he had the bar to go over. So
exactly.
You can't blame him for that. And then you got your MBA from the University of Iowa. Now I assume that was after you came to the States, right? Or did you come straight over for your university? Because I know you were with Procter for many years in your early years. Our alma mater, Proctoid as we call ourselves, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I did that with while working at Procter Gamble as an evening course. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So back to school. You obviously did your mechanical engineering degree. What was that first job that you got out of college? Did you work in that field originally, or did you go straight to Procter?
I went straight to Procter as a mechanical engineer. Yeah, I did an internship one summer with them. I spent a couple of summers in the U.S. actually, one in Washington, D.C., working as a waiter in an Irish restaurant, and one moving furniture in Boston, which is not unusual for Irish college students to come over here and spend some time here.
Right.
But the other summer, I did an internship at P&G and just fell in love with the type of work. You know, when you're in college, you really don't understand what you will do as an engineer. You know, you do all the mathematical formulas and all that, but how are you going to apply that in the real world? So I got to learn with P&G how to, it's a huge amount of it's working with people, working through people. And after that one summer, I was hooked, and I was lucky enough to be offered a full-time position to come back when I finished my education.
That's awesome. Well, I know we're both biased because we both started our career at Procter. You were there about twice as long as I was, but great place. And in my recruiting roles, when I see someone who's been 5 to 10 years or longer at Procter in their career, I know what they're made of. I know their foundation. What attracted you to the company, and why do you think that was your first job? Obviously, you did the internship, but even making that choice, I'm sure you had other potentials to go to. What was it that attracted you to P&G?
I think there's a few things about the company. Being a multinational was attractive. I like to travel and see the world, so that potentially gave me that opportunity, and it certainly played out like that. One of the features of the company that really attracted me at the time was this concept of promote from within. So they have a policy that they will only promote from within, and I'm a pretty naturally competitive person, and the concept of knowing the competitive field and knowing that I can progress up the ladder without somebody being brought in from the outside above me. For some reason, as a 21-year-old, that was a very attractive proposition. So
and Procter gave you leadership responsibilities pretty early on too, didn't they?
Yeah. I got to by 2 years into the job, I was running the largest department in Ireland on a big multinational launch. So that was pretty exciting. And I've throughout my 18 years there, they continue to stretch me and give me more and more responsibilities. I'd heard and read. I'm sure lots of people have read that P&G is renowned for being one of the best developers of leaders in the world. It's typically voted by that on one of the magazines each year. Right. And I always kind of scratch my head as to how that was, because while there's some formal training, there wasn't a whole lot of that. But you realize after the fact, when you reflect back, that the experiences that they put you in and the responsibilities that they give you at very young ages, and how dynamic that is, how many changes that has, really does help grow you in ways that you don't recognize at the time.
Yeah, when you're in it, and this is certainly my perspective, you don't recognize it because you're working with very competitive people. And what I found is when I went outside, it was like all of a sudden it dawned on me, wow, it's a very different work world out there with lots of different skills and lots of different abilities and lots of different approaches. And, sometimes that takes a while to get adjusting to. Did you go through that at all when you finally left Procter?
Yeah, it is always an adjustment. I mean, you're 18 years with one company. It's kind of like a marriage, and you leave that relationship and start a new one. And there's good and bad. There's different challenges outside of P&G where you maybe are working with a workforce that doesn't have the same types of experiences, or hasn't all been brought up in the same culture, for example. There's other good things and different dynamic things that you learn outside of P&G as well that different players bring to the table. Yeah.
Now, did they have a manufacturing plant in Ireland? Is that where you were working, or was more of an R&D facility? Or PDD, as we used to call it.
Yeah, it was manufacturing.
Manufacturing, got it. And what did they make there in Ireland?
That was the Olay skincare and the color cosmetics as well.
So you're right into the beauty care from the very get-go.
Yes, I've been beauty care the entire time.
Yeah, awesome. So when did you make that transition over to the States? Was that fairly early on? What was the first assignment which brought you over here?
it was about 3.5 years into the company. I'd asked to be transferred to the US. I had a couple of early successes, and I was relatively young. I was 25 at the time, and thought,
let's ride this wave a little bit.
Let's go international early before I get settled down, family wise. So I pushed for that, and they kind of said no initially, and then I actually had a different job offer from a different company in the US, and then P&G decided, hey, maybe it's worth finding a transfer for this guy, and I came over and hit the ground running a large compounding hair care facility.
Now, was that in Cincinnati first, or did it bring you straight to Iowa?
I went straight to Iowa City. Yeah.
Oh wow!
One of their largest beauty care sites, and worked several roles there in different operational and continuous improvement type roles. And then after a few years, during that time, I met my wife, who also worked in P&G as an engineer.
And you became the plant manager there as well.
I did eventually. Yeah. I actually moved away first and then came back as a plant manager a few years later.
Yeah. Fantastic. Great career. So tell me a little bit about kind of some of those early leadership lessons. If you reflected back, particularly from bosses and mentors, and, you mentioned something which was certainly true for me. I love the promote from within. You're never going to work for someone that either hasn't done the job before or certainly has excelled in other jobs that's put them in that leadership role. Were there some good lessons you learned along the way that you've stuck with you, even though after you've left Procter?
Yeah, there's plenty. I had a lot of great coaches during my time in P&G. One of the key things that kind of sticks out is this concept of results delivery. That there's plenty of people that spend a lot of time on the politics of their career and doing the right kind of networking, and you certainly need to do some of that. But I think sometimes you can lose focus on just delivering results. So I've always had that at the front of my mind. If we're going to deliver a record result year, of whatever result that you're responsible for, to really stay laser focused on that. I think the teams that work with you and around you and for you in that process, when they recognize that, we're going to go deliver this result come hell or high water, they jump on board and ultimately, I think, appreciate the laser focus versus kind of jumping around or trying to be a populist type of leader. Yeah. So that was one thing. I did learn a lot in my time in P&G about the importance of culture in the organization, and especially as I start to lead larger plants. My last plant was a $2 billion organization with over 600 full-time employees. So
you were in your 30s, right? I mean, barely, right? Barely.
Yeah. So it was quite a daunting
big responsibility.
Task, but also,
it's fantastic. I love that about Procter.
Yeah, but also, a great bunch of people that really wanted to make some changes and kind of helped coach me through it as much as I helped coach them through some of the changes we made, and really made some substantial both cultural changes first, and then really the results came after that.
Thinking back to the time, this was probably back in Ireland when you first started managing people, what were some of the challenges you had in that role? Because, again, Procter's your first job, first time you managed people were there. Do you remember some of those early lessons?
Sure. I mean, you come out of engineering college and you feel like you know a lot of things about how things work and how to get things done, I think. And then you're managing people that are as old or older than your parents. I think the key thing for me was to learn to be humble. I'm a kind of a pretty go-getter kind of a personality.
Right. You've mentioned competitive more than once.
Right. So to learn how to listen and pause, and especially people with all these years of experience, no matter what.
Right. Well, you were probably managing people that were much older than you in the early days. Yeah. Yep, right. Yeah. Line folks, et cetera. Yeah.
And really, you learn it doesn't really matter. Age doesn't play a whole lot into it. What experiences people have, what background, the diversity of thought, really always lends itself to a better solution in the end. So that wasn't first in my thoughts as a young 21, 22-year-old. But so I had to go through a learning curve with that. I had a couple of people pull me aside and tell me to calm down and to listen better. So I certainly made my share of mistakes, but I think that's definitely stuck with me over time.
We've all had good bosses, but Procter has its share of bad bosses too. So without mentioning any names, do you remember any specific behaviors or situations where you've either had bosses or colleagues that did something you went, ooh, boy, I'll never do that? And if so, what would that have been?
When I went to run my first plant out in Boston, it was a former Gillette plant. Made shave cream and these kind of aerosol products.
Right. Probably not too long after the acquisition then, right? Because
it was
Gillette hadn't been on that long. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
There'd been at least one P&G plant manager that had been sent in to kind of manage the transition. And I think there's some mistakes that were made, in my opinion, that were kind of what I would call the opposite of servant leadership. So my predecessor had a full wing of the building to themselves with, extra conference rooms and very separate from the actual operation. So I immediately went in and transitioned that into a training center and put myself in a small office close to the operation. I started wearing the same uniform as the employees and showing up on the line to help them on cleaning days and different things like that to really push this point of servant leadership. When I was sent out there, I was kind of told by my senior leadership that there was clearly a people problem in this plant, that people weren't getting the job done. They were missing quality checks or whatever. So I spent time shadowing individuals. I spent days on the floor, literally following people around and seeing what they did, and learned that there was far too many things on their to-do list than was physically possible. And
that was causing the errors, most likely.
People weren't trying to be bad, right? People want to do a great job, right?
Oh yeah, it's always the case. Yeah.
At the same time, I'd watched this a documentary on Boeing at the time, and how they reinvent the next version of an airplane, and through that combination, I came up with what I call the airplane model, where I sat down all of the leaders in the organization and I created this rule that if you want to roll out any new thing to this operation, to the people that do the real work on the floor, before you do that, you need to remove something of equal or greater time from their place, which is the same rule about designing a new airplane. You can't add on the new components without taking something of equal or greater weight off of it. And we made that rule public throughout the whole organization. So the focus shifted from just telling people, rolling things downhill to the person at the bottom of the ladder, to the leaders coming up with simplification techniques to take work off of their plates. And we found a ton of wasteful work to be able to take off their plates. That had a huge impact on morale, on productivity, on us doing the important stuff that really needed to be done. And that kind of set us on our way on both the cultural journey and the results journey.
Awesome. Now, were they a lean operation already? Or, because it sounds like a lot of lean principles came into that.
Yeah, I mean, we have, P&G has its own version of lean, but very consistent with the Toyota methods, et cetera. So, and Gillette were probably half a step behind P&G on that front, but had lots of good things as well that maybe, through the acquisition were overlooked. So we try to get the best of both worlds.
Now, you left Procter as a plant manager and pretty much became a CEO pretty quick, right? Because Northwest Cosmetic Labs before transitioning to Elevation Labs. Tell me about that transition. Was that hard to leave Procter after all those years? Or was it, time to kind of move on and this was a unique opportunity to grab the golden ring of the C-suite?
Yeah, it was very difficult. It was the most difficult decision of my life, to be honest with you. And I went back and forth on the decision every day leading up to the deadline I had self-imposed. But ultimately decided to, I do have an entrepreneurial spirit inside me. I've always wanted to have a go of having, some more control over the destiny of a company. And really, and in P&G, while you get to demonstrate or practice some of that, there's, being as big a company as it is, there's definitely a lot more bureaucracy and red tape to work through to make a change. So that was kind of the attraction to give this opportunity a go.
Did someone like me come after you? Is that how it came about?
Somebody exactly.
Blame it on the recruiter.
Exactly. Yeah, I certainly wasn't out there looking for opportunities. I had plenty of things going on with P&G, but and actually, interestingly enough, I hadn't ever been to Idaho. It was one of the last 5 states that I hadn't visited. So I kind of took the opportunity to come and see the state and have a look at the company. I wasn't taking it all that seriously until I met some of the people here and was blown away by their level of passion and ownership, commitment to the customer, and the facility that the organization had built here, and the plan to do further acquisitions. All of those things got me excited, and between myself and my wife, we made a pretty big decision to take the leap of faith.
Fantastic. Now, we spoke around the Thanksgiving time as we planned for this, and you told me a little bit about the transition between Northwest Cosmetic Labs and Elevation. Tell me a little bit about that again. How did that come about?
Sure. So as I had arrived, the company had just made its first acquisition of a company down in Los Angeles, a color cosmetics company. And to be honest with you, some of the cultural challenges were pretty evident as I got involved. And some of those, I believe, came from the concept of who bought who and who owns who, and some of this kind of language was being used, which wasn't helpful on any front. So,
but you knew this was coming, right? That the acquisition or the merger when you joined, or was that new information after you came in?
I knew slightly before I formally joined, but I knew that there was acquisition work underway. And about a year later, I kind of led the way through another acquisition of a company out in Colorado that does natural and organic products, Colorado quality products. And as we were doing that, I took the learnings from the first acquisition and decided that it would be better for everyone if we rebranded our company with a parent company called Elevation Labs, so that we're all kind of sister companies versus any kind of hierarchy between the divisions. Because one thing that's critically important to me is that we all work well together. I have the pleasure of visiting each of the divisions every month, and we do different reviews and a kind of accountability, and I get to walk around the floor and meet with people, and every single time I see something that blows me away, some breakthrough activity or process that one of our leaders has developed. And one of the things that I learned from my time in P&G is, it's hard to get people to reapply each other's ideas. So we came up with something called the Robin Hood Award. It's the biggest award we give out in the company every year, for whichever team or individual steals shamelessly from another division and copies their practice and puts it in place. So when we do these tours, we have a whole list of Robin Hood activities. People use it as a verb now in the company. I Robin Hooded this, and it's
take from the rich to give to the poor. That's
exactly
fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
The cultural implication, the things that get awarded is that don't go reinvent the wheel or don't make it your own thing.
It's okay to adopt or adapt.
Yeah, we want to show up to the customers the exact same way. So we all have the exact same daily direction setting processes. We have the exact same visual aids, quality practices, all those kind of things. And while they will continue to get improved, as they get improved, they'll be reapplied instantaneously in the other divisions.
Nice. Now, when you joined as I believe the COO, correct? But did you know you'd be on the trajectory for the top slot, or did that kind of evolve over the first year or so?
I'd talked to the recruiter and the private equity firm about that opportunity, and kind of hoped if I performed well, it might show up 2 or 3 years into the assignment, but it actually happened about 3 months into the assignment. So
tell us a little bit about that.
Faster than I anticipated. There's different dynamics going on in the company, and for one reason or another, the opportunity showed up, and the board of directors, from whatever they'd seen from the first couple of months, asked me to kind of step in as president initially, and just kind of test the waters, and over the next 3 months, basically, whatever I did was good enough for them to offer me the CEO position. So there's a lot of responsibility early, but
all those years of P&G training paid off, I think, Michael, right? Yeah,
something like that. Yeah, it was a good opportunity.
I've heard it said recently that it can be somewhat uncomfortable having your answers questioned rather than your questions answered as a CEO. Have you ever been in that situation?
One of the things that we do is we do communications to all of our divisions, to every employee, basically, in English and in Spanish every month, which is quite a lot of effort. It's basically a full day a month of my time. But to get to talk to the employees and hear questions back of what's going on and what the strategy is. Sometimes when you've got 200 people in a room, people are a little bit shy to raise their hand and ask a question. So I also started doing something that I call open mic events, where we have about 10 to 20 people, typically a department-sized group, and we sit down for an hour, sometimes over a lunch, and they get the opportunity to ask me any questions that they want to. What's going on in the company? What's the strategy? Sometimes personal questions. I get to hear from them what are the challenges that they're having, and this has been hugely insightful to me to really stay in touch, especially across 3 divisions, across a geography, with where the sentiment of the organization is. It also helps them hear closer to firsthand kind of where my thought process is. And I think that's helped both answer the questions and question the answers, and keep the dialogue very open.
Have they been bold enough to come up with some challenging questions, from the ranks about what management may or may not be doing?
Yeah, I really think everybody is extremely comfortable through this process of asking anything that they want to ask and making different suggestions, some of which we've really implemented within a month or two, because they're really good suggestions. And when people see that happening, then they really feel listened to. And I think that's really helped both the culture and ultimately the results.
And I'm sure your humility as well, right? It always, the more humble I think as a leader servant can be, the more open feedback you typically get. And that usually generates a much better working style, and certainly a lot more satisfaction of those in the rank and file.
Yeah, and we have people here for 20 plus years. It's only a 25-year-old company, but I've got to believe they know a whole lot more than me about certain situations. So you have to be able to listen. Absolutely.
Awesome. How would you say your leadership styles evolved over time, particularly, the 18 years obviously at Procter, and now the 2-3 years so in the new job? Have you made modifications and changes? Have there been things that have been revolutionary, maybe more than evolutionary?
I think I'd start off saying that there's a lot that's been consistent. The competitive drive, the delivering of results, the focus on that has never changed. I think the style about which I achieve that has definitely evolved. More and more on the listening front, gathering input, getting buy-in early on. Getting the team aligned like that. I think I've grown more humble over time, I think, on that front. Always
probably more
room
comfortable with that. And more comfortable with that as you've seen the results over the years.
Exactly, yeah. And I think, interestingly enough, in this role as CEO, given you're at the top of the ladder, it's even more comfortable. I'm not necessarily trying to impress anybody from a career or politics standpoint, like you typically would be doing in a P&G type of a world. So you get to really listen and you can do what you want with the feedback and move forward. But I've also learned the value over time of surrounding myself with great people. I've had some people that have joined me from P&G, with other great people that have been in this company all along, and some others again that we've brought in to strengthen the team. But there's only so much you can do as a leader, as a CEO. A lot of it's enabling and empowering the people in your organization and serving them to be the best versions of themselves. So I think that the approach to that has just gotten stronger year after year.
Well, it sounds to me you don't only not need to be the smartest person in the room, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I get those good folks around us. Tell us a little bit about, building a company culture. What does that look like, particularly given, kind of the past Procter, right, in the new company, and the merging of the two companies. There probably was a little bit of strife and anxiety, right? And you bring people together. How do you as CEO make that happen? What does that look like at Elevation Labs?
Yeah, so I think being present and available to talk and to share your thought process. If you're invisible or in the background, you're not really influencing the culture as much as you could. Right. I think talking directly about controversial topics, if it's at the kind of level of policy, employee policy, or if it's dealing with the difficult employee kind of situation. I think being involved in that, people understanding where your principles are, people really do fall in line very quickly, I've found, and want to know kind of where your head's at. So if they're guessing that for a long time, I think the culture can go in lots of different directions unintentionally. So that takes work and effort. It takes traveling to other divisions. It takes talking to lots of people and being on the floor, being available. But it's so worthwhile in the long run. The other thing I think that's critical is really having a direction in the culture that you want to move the organization. Right. People can talk culture till the cows come home, but if they don't really kind of write it down and say these are the values we're going to live by, this is how I want our organization defined in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years time, and then here's an action plan that we're going to put together to actually achieve that. You can't just kind of sit back and hope everybody gets it and starts thinking the way you're thinking. You really have to put actions in place. So, for example, one of our actions is around reward and recognition. And what behaviors are we going to reward? Well, we put a process process in place called the MVP award that we give out every single month in that site communication I described. Nice. And we put the winner's picture up on the big screen and a description, most importantly, of the behaviors they had that we appreciate. So everybody hears these 5 winners every month and why they won, and that starts to shift the culture in a direction that you want to. And
kind of drawn back to the core values, right? You're using those to reinforce that. No, that's great. Exactly. Yeah. Because it's one thing to have a mission statement that's up on a wall, but I think you're right. Companies really have to live that, and people have to see it for it to become real for them.
Exactly. Yes.
What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire, Michael?
I think there's several things. I think that one of the first and foremost to me is a humility and a willingness to learn. You know, if somebody comes in and behave, no matter how expert they are in their field, if they behave like they know it all and it's going to be their way or the highway, I think we're in trouble from the get-go. If you show adaptability and eagerness and drive and passion for your work, if you illustrate work ethic, I know that's sometimes a taboo thing to talk about, but for me, in our beauty care world, it's constantly changing and evolving. There is a requirement to work hard when the customer requires that. So people there show that kind of flexibility, adaptability, and drive, and desire to learn and grow. They're the folks that we really, really want. We've actually started to evolve to not 100%, but over 75% promote from within here and really try and drive careers inside our company. So the vast majority of moves sideways and upwards have been internal candidates, and that's helped the culture immensely. It's helped our retention rates, improved drastically over the last couple of years. And but I want those people you need people that really want to grow and develop in those worlds. So that's something that I look for whenever I'm looking at a hire.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Michael, time has just flown by, but we do have one last question that we ask all our CEO guests. And, what career and life advice would you give to someone that perhaps has their eyes on the corner office someday?
Yeah, I think first thing I would say is to be clear on your goal, be clear with the people around you. Obviously, your boss should know that. Even if that role you're looking for is above your boss's role, I think you need to be bold enough to express that. Ideally, a mentor, a sponsor that's coaching you through to understand where you're going to go. And funnily enough, I think it's critical that your spouse understands that too. Now, that might seem obvious that would be the case, but
you'd be surprised how often that doesn't come up.
Right, and I'd advise some of our younger leaders to sit down with a pen and paper with your partner, and write down what you want to achieve, and then really describe what that life means. How much travel is that going to require? What kind of hours of work is that going to require? What kind of sacrifices need to be made? What education do I need to build in the meantime?
What impact might it have on the kids or the kids to be?
Exactly. At what time of our lives we want to kind of achieve that by, and so on. So I think having your partner support you through that journey, because there's plenty of challenges in that journey, is essential. And if you don't have their kind of understanding of what you're signing up for early on, that can be critical. Once you have everybody lined up and you understand the stepping stones to get there, my last piece of advice is to be very results focused. Don't forget your day job. Don't put all your energy into what the future is going to be and do all the politicking and networking to get there without delivering results for what you're responsible for. And then be patient. It's impossible to exactly map this out.
That's right.
Opportunities sometimes take longer than you would have desired or expected. And
or sometimes they take 2 to 3 months.
Exactly, right? You got to be opportunistic and flexible. Be geographically mobile is definitely a big advantage. That'll open up the amount of opportunities that show up and keep your ear to the ground. So I think if you do all those things, the sky's the limit. And you can get to where you want to get to.
Awesome. Well, Michael Hughes, President and CEO of Elevation Labs, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your journey into the corner office.
Great. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.